On April 12, 1945, Harry Truman became the President of the United States. He was thrown into a whirlwind. A slew of wartime problems suddenly became his to solve. He told reporters, "I felt like the moon, the stars, and all the planets had fallen on me." To make matters worse, Truman had met alone with President Roosevelt just twice during his 82 days as vice president. He had no idea the atom bomb even existed. But just 3 months later, Truman would give the order to use the atomic bomb. It was a difficult decision, a controversial one, and it sits at the top of a long list of important decisions that Truman would make during his presidency. It was Truman's ability to make these difficult decisions that separated him out from other leaders. When he passed away, the New York Times headline read, "Harry S. Truman, decisive president." President Truman was not afraid to make difficult decisions, and more importantly, he wasn't afraid to accept the responsibilities that flowed from those decisions. So what made him such an effective decision maker? At its core, Truman's decision-making process was quite simple. He would gather information, he would think about it, and then he would decide. But I think there are 3 pillars of Truman's character that really bolstered his skill in decision-making: preparation, action, and responsibility. Unlike many other politicians, Truman's highest level of schooling was high school. He was incredibly aware of his limited formal education, and that awareness drove him to compensate for it the only way he knew how, through preparation. When Truman was a senator, he was assigned to a subcommittee that was investigating railroad finances. So Truman vowed that he would be the most informed person on the topic. He made his way to the Library of Congress and began poring through books. Soon enough, his desk was piled high with over 50 books on railroad management and history. This example illustrates what was a cornerstone trait of Harry Truman's personality: preparation. But Truman also wasn't too proud to admit that he needed help. He surrounded himself with the best and the brightest, and he consulted with them on every major policy decision. He believed that pooled brains on an important subject were better than one head. Now, preparation was an important piece of Truman's decision-making process, but it wouldn't have amounted to anything if it hadn't been for his propensity for action. In a speech for the Marshall Plan, Truman argued that there are times in world history when it is far wiser to act than to hesitate. Truman understood that a decision eventually had to be made, and he believed that even a wrong decision was better than none at all. His biographer, David McCullough, wrote that he wanted all the facts he could get before he made up his mind. But if he could only get 80% of the facts in the time available, he didn't let the missing 20% tie him up in indecision. It was simple for Truman. When making a decision, Truman would ask how much time he had to decide, and when the deadline came, the decision was made. Now, this doesn't mean that Truman was haphazardly making decisions left and right. No, it means that Truman understood the value of preparation, but he also understood that a decision had to be made eventually, and preparation means nothing if not for action. When Truman was going to appoint George Marshall as Secretary of State, one of his advisors told him, "Mr. President, you might want to think twice about that." And Truman asked, "Well, why is that?" And he said, "If General Marshall becomes Secretary of State, in 3 or 4 months people will be saying he'd make a better president than you are." And Truman said, "He would make a better president than I am, but I want the best possible people around me." Truman had an incredible sense of responsibility to make the right decision, to make decisions in the best interest of the American people. He wasn't overly concerned with image or credit or even public opinion. He was concerned with the difference between right and wrong. Truman made plenty of unpopular and controversial decisions, but he didn't pay attention to the polls. One time, he even wrote to himself privately, "I wonder how far Moses would have gone if he'd taken a poll in Egypt. It isn't polls or public opinion of the moment that counts, it's right and wrong." Truman was concerned with long-run effects rather than short-term appearances. He fired General MacArthur at the height of his popularity. The people did not like that. It was one of the most unpopular decisions ever made by a president. But he knew that in the end, the people would judge him to have made the right decision. He told his staff that the American people will come to understand that what I did had to be done. Again, I want to remind us that at its core, Truman's decision-making process was incredibly simple. Truman would listen to both sides of an argument, he would think about it, and then he would decide. He knew the value of preparation, he knew the necessity for action, and he knew where his responsibilities lied. Truman is a fascinating figure because in many ways he's just like you and me. He wasn't a hero or a magician or a chess player. He was a real, fallible human who tried his best. Few of the decisions we make in life will weigh as heavily as Harry Truman's. But we can use these pillars of preparation, action, and responsibility as a framework for the important decisions in our lives. As I was researching this video, I came across an exchange between Truman and a reporter. A reporter asked Truman, "Mr. President, what happens when you make a wrong decision?" And Truman responded, "Then I make another decision." I think this is a powerful exchange for us to hold in our minds, because it shows that life is decisions, that as soon as we make one decision, there's another that will be there. And it's okay if we make a wrong decision, because we can make another one.